Okay. So, Ezra 1:5. Then the family heads of Judah. One of the reasons why we suspect that the chronicler wrote both Chronicles and Ezra and Nehemiah is because Ezra starts with the same passage that Chronicles ends with. Then the family heads of Judah and he has the same focus and focuses, and much of the same interest. Anyway, then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. All their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with valuable gifts, in addition to all the free will offerings. Moreover, King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem, and had placed in the temple of his god, or gods. Now we read about that in Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar took that stuff, but apparently he didn't actually use it. He just put it like in some vault somewhere. Belshazzar, the guy who was ruling when Babylon fell, took it out and used it and defiled it and blasphemed the name of God by doing so, which is what led to his fall. Cyrus, king of Persia, had them brought by Mithridath, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. This is probably the same guy that we read in the Chronicles genealogy called Shenazar, and he is in the royal line of Jeconiah. That is continuing the seed of David, the line of David. They're not going to be kings any longer, but the line of David does continue, even though the men who are in that line are no longer going to be reigning as king in Jerusalem. But there will still be a man carrying that line with him all the way down to Jesus' day, and he will be the king that comes from David. Right now, it's a guy called Sheshbazzar or Shenazar. There's some question about who this dude actually is. He may not be the Shenazar of First Chronicles genealogy. This is a Babylonian name. It could be an actual official that was appointed to go with the Jews by the Persians, or it could be an actual Jew who just has a Babylonian name. We don't really know for sure. The guy who will actually be the governor when they get back to the land and actually resume activity there is going to be named Zerubbabel. So this Sheshbazzar dude, whoever he is not going to last very long. So they counted out the items to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. This was the inventory. Gold dishes, I'm not going to bother with the numbers because the numbers are not very important. And the numbers are, of any place in the Old Testament Bible that is prone to scribal copying errors, it's these lists of numbers. So that's not really all that important. But the items were gold dishes, silver pans, gold bowls, matching silver bowls, and other articles. In all, there were 5,400 articles of gold and of silver. Sheshbazzar brought all these along when the exiles came up from Babylon to Jerusalem. Now, these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town, in company with Zerubbabel, Jeshua. And I'm going to get used to those two names. I'm going to be reading those names, Zerubbabel and Jeshua, a lot. Nehemiah, this is not the Nehemiah of the book of Nehemiah. He's going to come along 100 years from now. This is another dude named Nehemiah. Shariah, Reliah, Mordecai. This is not the Mordecai of the book of Esther. That's, again, about 50 years in the future. Actually more like 60 years in the future. Not him. And he's still in Persia when that book happens, but it's not that Mordecai. Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rahum, and Bana. The list of the men of the people of Israel. Okay, here we go. More names. I will go ahead and read the figures for these. The descendants of Parosh, 2172, of Sephathiah, 372, of Arah, 775, of Pahath Moab, through the line of Jeshua and Joab, 2812, of Elam, 1254, of Zatu, 945, of Zakkai, 760, of Bani, 642, of Bebai, 623, of Exad, 1,222, of Adonikam, 666, there's that 666 number, of Bigvai, 2,056, of Adon, 454, of Ater through Hezekiah, 98, of Bezai, 323, of Jorah, 112, of Hashum, 223, of Gibar, 95. The men of Benjamin, the men of Bethlehem, 123, of Netopha, 856, of Anathoth, 128, I'm assuming that's Jeremiah's Anathoth. Remember, he was told to buy a field there, and to keep a record of the transaction, the proof of the transaction, and store it somewhere where it would last a long time, so that it would be proof that God promised they would buy land and sell land in this area again. I'm assuming it's at Anathoth. Of Azmaveth, 42. Of Kiriath Jearim, Kephra, and Beeroth, 743. Of Ramah and Geba, 621. Of Michmash, 122. Of Bethel and Ai, 223. Of Nebo, 52. Of Magbish, 156. Of the other Elam, 1,254. Of Haram, 320. Of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 725. Of Jericho, 345. Of Senah, 3,630. The priests, the descendants of Jediah through the family of Jeshua, 973. Of Immer, 1,052. Of Pasher, 1,247. Of Haram, 1,017. The Levites, the descendants of Jeshua and Kadmiel through the line of Hodaviah, 74. Nobody wanted to go back and do the grunt work of the temple. That's what I read there, is that they couldn't motivate too many of the low-ranking grunts to go back and be the grunt work of the temple again. They weren't too excited about that. The singers, the descendants of Asaph, 128. The gatekeepers of the temple, the descendants of Shallum, Aber, Taman, Akub, Hatita, and Shobai, 139. Are you glad you read all those genealogies just now to recognize all those names? 139. The temple servants, the descendants of Ziha, Hasufa, Tabaoth, Keras, Sayaha, Padon, Lebanah, Hagabah, Akub, Hagab, Shalmai, Hanan, Gedal, Gehar, Rahaya, Rezin, Nakoda, Gazam, Uzzah, Pasea, Besai, Asnam, Meunam, Nefusam, Bakbuk, Hakufa, Harher, Bazluth, Maheda, Harsha, Barkos, Sisera, Tema, Naziah, and Hanafa. Don't have a number for that one. The descendants of the servants of Solomon, whoever those people are, the descendants of Sotai, Hassophareth, Peruda, Jala, Darkon, Gedel, Shephatiah, Hatil, Pokereth, Hazabaim, and Ami. The temple servants, the descendants of the servants of Solomon, 392. The following came up from the towns of Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Kerub, Adon, and Immer, but they could not show that their families were descendants of Israel. The descendants of Deliah, Tobiah, and Nakoda, 652. So they had lost their genealogical records, apparently. Or either that or they never had them, and they were just pretending. My guess is that they've just lost them. Don't know. And from among the priests, the descendants of Hobiah, Hakaz, and Barzillai, a man who had married a daughter of Barzillai the Gileadite and was called by that name. These searched for their family records, but they could not find them, and so were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor ordered them. I don't know who the governor is. Sheshbazzar, Zerubbabel, I'm not clear. Ordered them not to eat any of the most sacred food until there was a priest ministering with the Urim and the Thummim. As far as I know, that never happened. Remember the Urim and the Thummim? Remember that? These mysterious stones that the high priest carried around with him in the days of Aaron and following. Back before the prophets started coming around and speaking the word of God to the people, they got their messages from God a lot of times from the Urim and the Thummim. These two mysterious stones that they would cast that would come up with answers that were there were some sort of binary yes-no answers, either or, yes-no. We read about this. David consulted the Urim and the Thummim. Now, a lot of times in the narrative, it's not written explaining they're consulting the Urim and the Thummim, but you can tell from the way the conversations are going they are, because David is asking simple yes-no questions and is getting simple yes-no style answers. And so when that happens, it's probably they're asking a question and they're casting the Urim and the Thummim and they're getting a yes-no answer, and then that is how they consult with God. Once the prophets started coming along, we don't really read about the Urim and the Thummim again. In fact, this is the first time I've heard it mentioned since the days of David, practically. And as far as I can tell, they never consulted the Urim and the Thummim. I don't even know what the Urim and the Thummim are. They're some kind of stones or something. They're not really clear. But from the days of Aaron and on down, this was how they consulted God, was asking a question and casting these stones, and then whatever the stones turned up, they took that to be the answer to their question. And the question was phrased in a way that could only be answered one or two ways, so the stones would give them one of two possible answers. But they don't really do that once the prophets come along. The prophets start speaking the message of God directly to them. As far as I can tell, they never cast the Urim and the Thummim. We don't read about this again in Ezra and Nehemiah. So as far as I can tell, they never did consult whether or not these people really, what to do with them. The whole company numbered 42,360. Besides, there are 7,337 men servants and maid servants, and they also had 200 men and women singers. These are not the temple singers, okay? I don't believe there were any women in the temple singers. Those were all males. These are just like singers, like, entertainers. People that would sing and perform for the rich people of the country. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave free will. Now, by the way, they would have had more men than women in this number. This 42,000 plus whatever, okay, the majority of those would have been men. And there would have been in that group a fairly large amount of unattached, unmarried men. This is going to cause problems later on, so keep that in mind. There are far more men than women. There are not enough women to go around for all the men, and that is going to cause problems later on. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave free will offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 drachmas of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly garments. The priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants settled in their own towns, along with some of the other people, and the rest of the Israelites settled in their towns. When the 7th month came, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and start the video.